Hello and welcome to this Nest Insight presentation on findings from our research paper, Retirement Saving in the UK. My name is Richard Notley and I am the Senior Analyst within Nest Insight and the main author of the Retirement Saving in the UK research. This second edition of Retirement Saving in the UK covers data to the end of the 2020-2021 financial year, and it builds upon previous research series How the UK Saves, which was published by Nest Insight in conjunction with Vanguard Asset Management. A background covering automatic enrolment and Nest is covered in the presentation that accompanied the previous edition of Retirement Saving in the UK. A link, for those who may not have seen this before, is provided at the end of this presentation. This year, we have decided to present a much deeper picture of the lived experience of Nest members and the wider retirement space. We have increased the amount of analysis presented, taking in information from external data sources, from providers such as the Office for National Statistics, as well as Nest's own member and employer surveys. The upshot is a much more thought-provoking piece of analysis that encompasses more information on Nest members than we have produced previously. In the last edition of Retirement Saving in the UK, we presented half-year data to September 2020. This was in order to show the initial findings from Nest data of the COVID-19 crisis. As we presented, the effect on Nest members was muted, with continued participation in Nest from employers and members and consistency of contributions. Government-led interventions, such as the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme, held up employment and prevented mass business closures, and the data we present in this edition, covering the second half of the 2020-21 year, shows the same picture. That said, in the intervening time, Nest has been able to conduct research with members on COVID-19 specific themes. In June 2020, almost half of those surveyed said they believed that the pandemic would have a significant impact on their personal finances. But by March 2021, this had fallen to 41%. As of the 31st of March 2021, around 917,000 employers had registered with Nest. Growth in employer volumes has naturally fallen since the end of the employer staging period. However, it is interesting to see that despite the COVID-19 crisis, employer volumes increased by 11% over the 12 months to March 2021. The corresponding growth in the preceding 12 months was 15%. As with the wider economy, Nest's employer landscape is dominated by micro firms, but it should be noted that the distribution by size of employers using Nest is very similar to that seen in the wider UK labour market. However, how Nest is used differs by the employer's size. Micro-sized employers appear to be using Nest for all employees. This is unsurprising, as administration at employers of this size is likely to be carried out by the business owner, who is unlikely to have the time or resources to manage more than one scheme. Also, these employers are more likely to have staged since restrictions on annual contributions into Nest were lifted, meaning that higher earners could be enrolled into Nest without the risk of breaching the cap. Beyond micro-sized firms, Nest appears to form part of an employer's pension provision, as the average count of active Nest members is less than the average number of employees these firms typically employ. Since the start of Nest, around 15 million enrolments have been made, with a 15% increase in the past year. Of the enrolments made in the 12 months to March 2021, around 10% have resulted in an opt-out. This is unchanged from the preceding 12 months, and yet another illustration that the COVID-19 crisis has not caused a change in behaviour towards opt-out among workers enrolled into Nest. Within the headline opt-out figure, there is a very slight difference by gender, with men slightly more likely to opt out than women. This is actually a change from previous years, where women were very slightly more likely to opt out. Of course, opt-out is a phenomenon observed only for workers in new jobs, and therefore the effect of existing employment being supported by the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme will not be represented in the opt-out figures. That said, cessation of contributions, which could be an indicator of members making a conscious decision following a change in income or employment situation, has not been seen in 2020-21 in any higher degree. Overall, around 2.3% of enrolments made since the start of Nest have resulted in a cessation. Of the enrolments made in the 12 months to March 2021, around 1.5% resulted in a cessation by the end of that period. Of course, we should note here that these are relatively new jobs, so the lower level of cessation needs to be taken in context with the longevity of the job. That said, it is clear from the overall numbers that cessation between March 2020 and March 2021 during the pandemic was negligible. Nest membership is evenly balanced from a gender perspective, with around 53% men and 47% women at the end of March 2021. This is a departure from predictions made prior to the onset of automatic enrolment, which, due to proportionally more women being ineligible based on income, suggested that men would outnumber women by 2 to 1. In a similar vein, predictions prior to automatic enrolment suggested that Nest membership would be highly skewed towards younger workers, who were far less likely to be saving into a pension. We can see this is indeed the case. Currently, around 30% of Nest members are 30 or younger. However, as time progresses, these younger members will clearly age, and the large enrolment of younger workers seen through the staging period will become less evident in the distribution of Nest members in the future. By 2050, we predict the age-based distribution of the membership will be much flatter, with no dominant group. By way of comparison, we predict the proportion of members aged 56 to 65 will double from around 12% today to around 24% in 2050. Using results of Nest's member research, we find that proportionally more Nest members have higher level qualifications than we may have predicted. Around 38% of members surveyed said they had at least a bachelor's level degree, with this proportion increasing in younger workers. Societal change in recent years means more younger people are attending higher education courses, and therefore more jobs in the labour market will naturally be taken by those with higher level qualifications. Also from surveys, we can gain an understanding of members' living situations. Home ownership rates are lower for younger people, and with a higher than average proportion of younger members, it is unsurprising that Nest members are less likely to be homeowners. Nest members earn, on average, about 30% less than eligible employees who are in a workplace pension in the UK, with earnings being lower for younger workers, who make up a large proportion of Nest members. This is somewhat predictable. But what is interesting is the fact that income for Nest members doesn't vary much across the age bands. Between the ages of 31 and 55, median income for Nest members is virtually flat, whereas in the wider population of eligible employees, income increases through the age bands up to around the age of 45 before tailing off. This distribution tells us that Nest members are employed in a subset of jobs across the economy, which vary little by the type of person doing them. That said, there is a clear and noticeable change in the gender pay gap for Nest members. The gap, based on annualized income, amounts to around 14% for those aged 30 and younger, but this increases to 26% for the over 30s. Nest members are also more transient, with around 35% leaving their job within any rolling 12-month period. Again, this is driven by the younger nature of the membership. Allied to the fact that members are often leaving their jobs, the proportion who are coming back is increasing too. As at the 31st of March 2021, around 38% of enrolments were of returning members, but we predict that this will increase to around 50% by 2025-2026. Legislative minimum contribution rates have been at a steady rate of 8% total, of which 3% must be paid by the employer, since April 2019. Therefore, the data we explore in retirement saving in the UK has 2 years' worth of contributions paid at this rate. We see that the vast majority of employers and members pay contribution at the legislative minimum rates. Around 85% of employers pay 3% and 89% of members pay 5%, which includes the tax relief element. Interestingly, despite the COVID-19 crisis, mean contributions in monetary terms rose 8% over the 12 months to March 2021. As with Retirement Saving the UK 2020, we split members into either continuous or partial contributors. Continuous contributors are those that have made at least one contribution in each of the previous 12 months. Partial contributors have made contributions at a frequency less than this. For continuous contributors, mean annual contributions were almost £1,500 in the 12 months to March 2021. In addition, members, whether active or inactive, are able to make direct contributions to their pension pot. Although these are not common, around 134,000 members have made at least one direct contribution since the start of Nest, and the total amount of money contributed in this way equates to nearly £370 million. Due to the youthful nature of the scheme, pot values in Nest are, in comparison to more established workplace pension schemes, relatively small. The mean pot value for all members, as at the 31st of March 2021, was just over £1,800, with the median balance being £715. The relative proportion of smaller pots is decreasing, however, as at the 31st of March 2021, around 43% of pots had less than £500, compared to 51% 12 months previously. The opposite is also true, as the proportion of pots with more than £5,000 has increased from just 3% in March 2020 to 9% in March 2021. As older workers tend to be more persistently employed than younger workers, it is unsurprising that older workers tend to have larger pot balances. Since April 2017, Nest members of any age have been able to transfer their pot out of Nest and also been able to transfer existing pots into Nest. To date, very few members, only around 1%, have completed transfers in or out of Nest, but it is interesting to see that transfers both in and out occur across the age groups, although they are proportionally more common amongst the older age groups. The average value of a transfer out is around £1,800, which is roughly equivalent to the average pot size. But the value of transfers in is much higher, at an average of over £5,200. Obviously, Nest is a relatively young scheme with small pots, but there are some members who have more considerable assets built up elsewhere who are clearly keen to transfer these into Nest. One might assume that members who are keen to transfer are likely to do so quickly, but this does not appear to be the case. In the cases of members transferring out, only around 11% of transfers are requested within the first 2 months of the member leaving the scheme. And in the case of transfers in, this proportion is around a fifth. In this edition of Retirement Saving the UK, we explore the topic of later life and retirement for the first time. We find there has been a marked change in the concept of retirement since the start of automatic enrolment. The state pension age is becoming less of a clear point at which people are retiring. Across the labour market in 2010, over 70% of employees retired from paid work at age 65 or younger. By 2020, around 40% of workers are retiring beyond the age of 66. This change appears to have manifested itself in how Nest members think in terms of their own retirement. We find that only a third of members aged 40 and over say they expect to retire at their state pension age. For members who are over 60, 40% say the reason they expect to continue working is because they are not ready to stop work, or less than a quarter saying they would need to continue to keep working to pay for essential items. That concludes our insight into Retirement Saving in the UK 2021 publication. In this short presentation, we've highlighted some of the key findings, but the main report covers the analysis in much more detail. Retirement Saving in the UK can be found at the Nest Insight website, along with all the current and previous work streams that Nest Insight are involved with. If you are interested in staying up to date with the Nest Insight research, please get in touch using one of the methods shown.